Good. So we're live. And so you're from Chattanooga, this group,
Yes, yes,
and you come here every year.
yes,
But in this room, I've only given a lecture with this group one time
yeah,
because you were there.
yeah.
I remember you, I think.
I know.
Yeah. Tell me about yourself. How do I know you? Did you talk last time at all?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so. And we talked about
We,
the rishis, I think.
we take the photo,
Yeah, yeah.
group photo with you.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, we took a photo together. Yeah. And we spoke. Oh, I remember with that group, I asked, where did the Veda come from? Something like that.
Right.
And people said the rishis. And so I said, where did the rishis get it? And do you remember my answer? Anybody who was here? Cognized. Probably the most important word we could learn and that the world should learn is cognition. Who knows what cognition even is? Not many people. The rishis, now rishis, we could say they're people, but they're much more than that, aren't they? They're actually structured within the nature of existence itself. And so the actual flesh body rishis, they're just incarnations of operators, of mechanisms within Chaitanya, within the unified field, as they would say it in physics. But as the rishis incarnated, they had perfectly pure physiologies, so pure that they could allow their awareness to go all the way to the very depth of existence, to that one thing called Chaitanya, the self-interacting dynamic of oneness. That's the Veda. And so those very subtle impulses of creative intelligence, those very subtle impulses of the self-interacting dynamic of oneness, welled up through their physiology and out their senses, out their vocal cords. And they chanted Veda. What part of Veda depended on the rishi, the nature of their own physiology, unique to each rishi. And that's called Vedic cognition. So the rishis didn't make up the Veda. The Veda is there, it's eternally, at every point in creation, all the time. But their physiologies were so refined that those very subtle impulses that are very source of everything welled up through their physiologies. You see? Now, there are lots of rishis, there's 7 sapta rishis, the main rishis, the sapta rishis. You all know this. And the head one for this prapancham, now in the West we call it this universe, but Vedic knowledge says no, there's only one universe, and within that one universe there are a lot of different prapancham, a lot of different universes, but really there's only one. So they use the word wrong in a way. So this prapancham, this one, what we call in the West a universe, the source of that knowledge that came from who? Within the unified field, within Chaitanya? Brahma. Brahma, the son of Brahma, they say the son of Brahma, was Atri, the rishi that is the upholder of the laws of nature of this universe. It's pretty neat, huh? Now we have 7 saptarishis, and there's a principle in mathematics, they call it mapping, but we don't need to worry about that word. The idea is that each of the saptarishis go along with one of the stars in the Big Dipper. And so if you take a picture of the Big Dipper with the North Star, the North Star stays stationary. Take it 3 months later, it's here. 3 months later, it's there. 3 months later, it's there. Now, if you superimpose all 4 of those at once, what do you get? A swastika. So you see, the swastika is a much more beautiful symbol than just something made up. It's structured in nature itself. It all gets very deep, doesn't it? Because people can say, well, what about on planet Mars? There's a different North Star. Well, it's all infinitely correlated. Very complex, very sophisticated. But what I actually wanted to talk about, I wasn't planning on talking about any of that. I don't really plan my talks, we come, we talk, But I know the most common question I ask I'm asked when I come and see people visiting Mount Soma is, who are you? Why? What is this? Why Mount Soma? Why are you doing this? And so I thought I'd talk about that for all of you to hear. Like a lot of young children, when I was just a boy, I thought a lot about the world. And I remember my brother, I was just 5 years old, and my older brother, he said, you carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. You know, I worried about the world. A lot of children are like that, but I was like that. And so then I wanted to figure out, what is this universe? What is this? You know, I got into philosophy, Descartes, how do I know my hand is really a hand? Turns out it's not, it's Maya. But I wondered things like that. And so I went into physics and mathematics and tried to figure out the universe. And then I realized that there was more to it than physics, because I talked to my one physics professor and he was doing this all the time. Another one was doing that all the time. I realized there's more to life. There's something that's missing. So I came to my conclusions about life. And I said, there has to be one thing. One thing. And out of that one thing comes everything. And I went on like that. I was telling somebody that I just bumped into in a rooming house I was staying. And he said to me, he said, if you're into that sort of thing, he said, you should go study with the gurus in India. They know all about that stuff. And so I was lucky, because the first person I went to was Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. And he was great. And I was in his ashram for 9 years, and then I'd go back to the United States and that, but I was with him from the time I was 21 years old. And just to be, you know how if you've been in the presence of a great master like that, it's remarkable. If they're in a building, if he was here somewhere at Mount Soma, all of Mount Soma would feel different. You know, his consciousness just permeates everything like that, you know. And so I remember when I was in the ashram, this was like 1981, 1982, something like that. And one of the people in the ashram said, oh, you know, there's this part of Vedic literature. There's this part of Vedic literature that talks about an enlightened city. And it's in the Vedas. It's in the Stapatya Veda, huh? And what it says there is that if you just follow these instructions, how to build an enlightened city, one city radiates enough divine light that it can transform an entire continent. And so there's 6 continents. So 6 enlightened cities is enough for the whole world. And one enlightened city is enough for all of the United States, Canada, Mexico, like that. You see? So I heard that, and I thought to myself, we should build it. Why hasn't anybody built it? I know why now, but at the time I was just innocent. I was a 21-year-old kid, or no, I was 30 years old at the time, something like that, because I joined the ashram when I was 30, 31, like that. And so why didn't anybody build it? And it stuck with me my whole life. And so I remember when I started my organization after I left the ashram, and that I started Mount Soma organization. And my students back in 1994, were like, that's the very first lecture you ever gave. You talked about building an enlightened city. And so when it came time to build it, I decided that I'd ask pundits. And I went to different pundits. I said, how do you build an enlightened city? Where are the instructions? You know, one after another, every pundit. So we don't know what you're talking about. We don't know. These pundits know everything. You know, you ask them a question about the Veda and they chant, you know, like that. But we don't know. So I remembered some things about it. And so I decided I would build based on my memory. So I bought this land because I knew the proper elevation, the proper slope, you know, Vastu pointing to the east, like that. Just the different things I could remember. And still nobody knew anything about it. And so I thought, well, we should have a Shiva Lingam. and put it right in the center of town. That makes sense, doesn't it? So I thought, we didn't have much money. I mean, we spent all our money on the land. We have like 450 acres or something. And so I thought, well, we'll just build a little garage and we'll put a Shiva Linga in the middle of it, and we have something. So I started, and one thing led to the next. People made donations, and we had enough to build a Shiva temple, Sri Somesvara temple, all perfect vastu. And so we hired a Sapati. He was a disciple of Ganapati Sapati, you know Ganapati Sapati. And we hired this Sapati from South India, and he designed the temple, and we built the temple. And then at one point I asked him, do you know anything about how to build an enlightened city? This is pretty amazing. You know who Vishwakarma is. Vishwakarma is the architect of the whole universe, this prapancham. And then his, like, somebody who works under him just for this earth, his name is Mamuni Mayan. He's a rishi. And Mamuni Mayan was in charge of earth. So it was Mamuni Mayan that cognized how to build an enlightened city. And do you know that not only did this Stapati know of Mamuni Mayan and all about how to build an enlightened city, he had the palm leaves of Mamuni Mayan, how to build an enlightened city. Amazing. And it almost seemed like I wasn't supposed to know any of this until we started. It was almost like my teacher wanted me to find it within myself a little bit before they just told me everything. I don't know. But at any rate, I was talking to this Stapati, SK we call him, and he said, well, yes, a Shiva Linga right in the center of town, a Shiva temple, perfect. And I thought to myself, what if I put a Rama temple, or something else, Shiva temple is right. And so he gave us the design. The whole thing is huge. You probably know Angkor Wat. Do you know Angkor Wat? Angkor Wat is an ancient Vedic temple in Thailand, but it's abandoned now. It's all overgrown with jungle and everything. And some people think that was an enlightened city. But the thing is, the knowledge is extremely delicate. If we think the knowledge how to build a cell phone is delicate, knowledge of the technology of Chaitanya, of the unified field, is even more delicate. We have to be more careful. It's not fanaticism, it's science. And so we have to be very careful and very strict. So some people talk about, Hinduism. I talk about Hinduism. And I remember when Panditji came from India, I said, Panditji, this is a Vedic temple, not a Hindu temple. And he at first he looked at me and said, same thing. And why is it different? It's because, like Adi Shankara said, Adi Shankara, you know Adi Shankara? Adi Shankara said that the knowledge has to be purified every single generation, or it gets lost. It's that delicate. It slips through the fingers. And so we have to be very careful, not fanatic. This isn't like fanaticism. This is like science. See, that's the beauty of the Veda. It's heart, and it's also science. It's both. It's everything. And so Panditji now, he knows more than I do. You bring up any subject, and he starts rattling off the Veda about that subject. I'll never know all that. But nevertheless, he understood what I was getting at, what I was trying to say. And he said, oh, yeah, of course, So what we're doing here is we're wanting to build an enlightened city that's completely in accord with natural law. Nature. What is the Veda? It's nature. It's just nature. And so that's what we're trying to do, but it's very difficult. And who can even guess? I didn't know. I had to experience it, unfortunately. But what's the biggest challenge to building an enlightened city? What's the biggest challenge? When I was in, where was I? Switzerland with Maharshi. I remember once he walked in the room. There was a group about this size. I was sitting right in the front where you're sitting. And he walked in and he looked very thoughtful. And he sat down and he grabbed a rose and he held the rose up. And he said, when a rose gets big, just naturally the thorns get big also. He said, I'm wondering what to do about the thorns. Now, when he said that, I thought I understood everything he was talking about. I thought he was just talking about the world. You know, there's lots of problems out there. We have to deal with the problems. And as more knowledge comes out, negativity will. Now I know what he was really talking about. Because when you build an enlightened city, the principle that Punjaji likes to talk about, positive, attracts negative. Positive attracts negative. It's like, this is Kali Yuga. This is the age of the Rakshasas where they rule the planet, huh? That makes sense? Is that right? And so they own all of this. That's how they think, if we're going to say it that way. And so if you build an enlightened city, you're threatening what they think belongs to them, and they don't like it. So they fight. They fight. But the way it really works is that the Rakshasas dwell in the hearts and the minds of the people. It's not like there's some Rakshasa sitting on a cloud somewhere saying, oh, I'm going to fight this guy. It's more natural than that. And so what happens is you meet a lot of resistance. And the people here will tell you that it's unbelievable, the resistances that come up against us in trying to build an enlightened city. It's remarkable. But I tell my people, steady hand on a rudder. Just we keep going, we keep going, we keep going. And what's going to happen is sooner or later, the time is going to come where we develop so much sattva that will overcome the negativity. Now, this is very interesting. 5,000 years ago, he's over there. You can come through. That's fine. No worries. 5,000 years ago, Lord Krishna told Mother Divine, he said, in 5,000 years, there's going to be a brief period of Sat Yuga that comes about right in the middle of Kali Yuga. 5,000 years ago, he told Mother Divine that. So we are at that transition point right now. And one way we know that, you know, if you take water and you cool it down, it gets, the molecules vibrate less, a little less crazy, a little more, they call it coherent, right? But right at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, right when it's about to freeze, it goes crazy. And then it gets below that and perfect coherence. Right now we're at that time. And all you have to do to confirm that is look at the news. There have been wars in the past. There have been terrible things in the past. But now everything, everywhere you look, is crazy. Men are not men. Men can get pregnant. Women are men, whatever you want. Nothing makes any sense anymore. The way you fight inflation is to spend more money. Nothing makes any sense. It's that transition time. There's an interesting thing. This man I know, he's a numerologist, Western. Doesn't really pay any attention to Veda, I don't think, not that I know of. But he's a very good numerologist. And he wrote an article not long ago based purely on Western numerology, saying that this is the time of transition into an enlightened age, a golden age. So we see it from a lot of different places. Even Maharshi would talk about it, you see. Well, here's an interesting thing. Back in the mid-90s, something like that, Maharishi was with a Jyotishi on stage, asking about the world. And the Jyotishi said, the age of enlightenment, Sat Yuga, will come when a man with orange hair is president of the United States. When I built this, I bought the land, we put up the Shiva temple, everything. Only then Did someone come here who knew the people in charge of the Sapataveda department from Maharshi? And he said Maharshi was looking in this area right here to build a city. But the land wasn't available at that time. That's why he went to Boone. He went somewhere else. I didn't know that. And then we ended up buying this land because it became available, years later. And we started. Now that makes, I don't think we were lucky. I think, these masters, they're driving. They're the magnet. We're just little iron filings dancing around thinking that we're doing something. But we're just following him, And so we're building this right where he wanted to build it, which is pretty amazing, I think. Do you know that the United States government, this was decades ago, I understand the locals tell me, build a copper building right in this area somewhere because there's something different about this land, something unique about it. And they wanted to study it, something about the electromagnetic properties or something. So at any rate, that's what we're about. And so far we've put maybe $30-40 million into it, different people. To complete the whole thing totally would probably be 150 million. But step by step. And again, everything is infinitely correlated, right? It's all not coincidence. So the age of enlightenment is coming. That's for sure. The question is it going to come as a result of an Armageddon? You know how Mother Divine, every so often she just wipes the slate clean and starts over because the world's too crazy. But if we infuse enough sattva into the world, it can happen more easily, or it can even happen seamlessly. And so we're not just building Mount Soma in an enlightened city in hopes that we can bring forth in an age of enlightenment, Satyug. That's coming. But to bring it about smoothly, so there's less suffering, so we don't have to have an Armageddon, you see. And I think now with all the efforts of so many groups and things, that it's happening. But that's been my commitment from the time I heard about it in 1981, 82, like that, when I first heard it. I said, we have to build it. But things are funny. There's this, I mentioned this Angkor Wat, which some people think was an attempt to build an enlightened city in Thailand. And what happened was that it was a Vedic structure. And then what happened was that somewhere along the line, they switched to Buddhist. And the knowledge is delicate. It's not that Buddhism is wrong and the Christianity is wrong and only this branch of Hinduism is right. But it's like you can't take the carburetor out of a Volkswagen and put it in a F-150 truck. The technologies are different. And so right like that, the whole thing got ruined. You see? So we have to be very careful to continue the purity of the knowledge. Even the Stapati from South India said that one of the places in India where they got in trouble was they built a beautiful Vedic temple, just everything proper. But then years later, a king or somebody would want to stick another Murti in there. And that's all fine, but the Murti was in accord to a different design. It was a Volkswagen Murti put in a F-150 temple. And he said it just ruined everything. And so we have to be very vigilant and very strict and very careful. It's not old-fashioned. It's not fanaticism. It's commitment to the science of Vastu. The science. Because and we all know science is important when we think of our health, when we think of anything. But it's important also in spirituality. Because if we have that foundation for the science, Vedic science, then the heart can soar and blossom and our lives will be better in every way. And that's where real bhakti can find its fulfillment, you see. Yeah. Any questions or comments about anything? Otherwise, we'll finish up unless I'm here all day or I can leave right now, Any comments or questions about any of this or about anything?
In our Hinduism, we say moksha. So, what is the central idea of moksha?
Of like mukta meaning moksha. It's a all these are beautiful. This is a whole subject. We could go an hour about that. But here's the thing. The underlying basis of everything is Chaitanya, or you could say Bhavati Tam. It's that underlying basis of the infinite purity, coherence, intelligence, divinity that underlines and births the whole universe. But here's what happens. We evolve. In that sense, Darwin was right. That we evolve, the species evolve. But what Darwin didn't know is that there's a force accelerating, propelling evolution. And that is that the unified field is there. The Chaitanya is there, underlying everything, breathing intelligence, coherence, harmony into all organisms. Even biologists will tell you, they did studies, scientific studies, and they said Darwin can't be the whole story because it happened too fast. All of a sudden you have human beings that happen too fast. They're missing something, and what they're missing is the idea that there's this source of divinity, Chaitanya, breathing intelligence, breathing harmony, propelling evolution in a direction. And then what's that direction? The direction of God, the direction of Chaitanya, the direction of divinity. Now, that's an evolutionary process. And even within human beings, there's an evolutionary process still going on. And what's that evolutionary process? It's a process when we move past what Maharshi Patanjali called samskaras, storehouse of impressions, the chit. Our minds are made up largely of impressions in the mind, programmings, conditionings. And so as we purify the chit, we purify out the grip that those impressions have on our awareness, the things we believe, the things we feel, the distortions, right? And as that happens more and more, then the chit has less and less of a grip on us until finally we're no longer really functioning from those impressions, even good impressions, but still they're impressions. And what happens then is at some point, instead of functioning from that conditioning, from that chit that Maharshi Patanjali spoke about, then we start functioning from Chaitanya. We start functioning in harmony with the underlying basis of all existence. Now, we all sense that. Every single person in this room senses that divinity within. Even people that don't believe in God and don't believe in divinity, they can sense that there's something precious and important within themselves, huh? But now we understand that it's God. It's the divinity that dwells within all of us. But what happens is there's a moment where the chit dissolves, and we become more and more awake to the Chaitanya value, and there's a moment in time when it flips. And that moment when it flips, that's called liberation. That's called the awakening. And so that's what a Jivamukti is, you know? It's a person that's living that level of life. And it's a very rare thing. Now, again, I can talk for hours about any of this stuff. But in the Himalayas, there are two temples I'd like to talk about. One is called Mukteshwara, and that's the temple of one awakening, Mukti, the one awakening. And then there's also Jigeshwara. Jigeshwara is 108 temples, I think it is. It's in the Himalayas also, and there are all these different awakenings. So you see, we have different awakenings, and a lot of times people have an awakening, they think, oh, I'm enlightened. It's just one awakening. The light bulb went off, you know. But what we're talking about when we talk about full enlightenment, we're talking about the ultimate awakening, the Maha awakening. And that's enlightenment. And that's what people call moksha. Strictly speaking, moksha is something that happens after you're dead. And if you're enlightened and still in a physical body, they call it something else, but that doesn't matter. Yeah, it's just a word, that I don't remember right now. Anything else? Anything else? Okay, I think we're finished. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you again next time. Ah, how much time did I spend in India? I was in the ashram for 9 years. Of that 9 years, and then other times in India, maybe a year and a half total in India. Yeah. I got the knowledge from Maharshi wherever he was, but these are all stories I could go on for hours. And maybe. No, I didn't go to Mount Kailash, but I started in the south. I was at, of course, Mukteshwar, Jageshwar, that's in the north. Then I went to Kanyakumari, Meenakshi, Rama, Rameshwaram, Venkateshwara. And I went south, but then I went north, Delhi and the Lakshmi Temple in Mumbai. And I went, there's so many places though. You can go to a different place every week, and by the time you're done, you've only seen a few. There's so many,
Thank you.
Jai Shri Shankara.